Right now, somewhere, a company is making a move in plain sight. The street reads the headline. Autonomy AI sees the signal. We deliver it before the market catches up. Autonomy AI. Your models, our intelligence. Request a private strategic briefing at AUTNMY.ai.
Welcome to Autonomy Signals, the new show from the road to autonomy, co-hosted by myself, Grayson Brulte, and my partner, Rob Grant. Each week, Rob and I are going to cut through the noise and deliver you the signals that matter the most. This week, we've got three really interesting signals. One, there's the possible delay of Tesla's Optimus Gen 3 due to the regulatory environment in China and potential rising cost. Then there's the EU says, well, wait a second, we're trying to regulate AI too fast. What's that going to look like with the impact on autonomous vehicles? And then Waymo, the leader in America, there's potential. We've got lobbying records. They're looking to go to Canada. Rob, let's start with Tesla. What's the delays potentially coming out of China because this new regulatory environment that's taking place?
Yeah, thanks, Grayson. Really excited for what we've got building here. And look, Omega has provided us some increasingly important and relevant information about what is going on out of the CCP and Chinese regulations. In particular, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology is cracking down on what they call dual-use technologies. Now, most of our audience knows what that means. That means it's a technology that can be used for commercial and military purposes. And so the MIIT in China has put on a new series of restrictions about needing a permit and to meet new standards over in China for the use of dual-use technologies. And where this hurts Tesla and their Optimus program is that Tesla relies on specialized magnets in order to use in Optimus, in particular for their hands and digits and actuators and things like that. And China controls 90% of this rare earth material. And so what the Chinese government has essentially said is, you must share your technology and how are you going to use it and some of how it operates and some of the technical specifications behind it with us in order to get a license if we believe your technology is capable of dual use. As we all know from the videos that we've seen out of China, they are really prioritizing development of humanoids. Unitree and Exomi and others are really making great headway there. And their fear is that the US is going to compete with them, in particular Tesla. And so what the MIIT is saying here is, if we believe your technology can be used for military purposes as well, and you're relying upon rare earth materials sourced and purchased from China through Chinese suppliers, then you're going to have to get our approval to do that. And that's really going to put a real kind of structural impediment to what Tesla wants to do on the timeline that Tesla wants to do it in terms of developing, mass producing Optimus robots and the revenue that comes along with it.
There's a lot of revenue, but the one thing that Elon has posted on X a lot about, I'm moving my hand, dexterity. The special rare earth magnets that give it the 22-degree dexterity, they come out of China. So the government says, well, wait a second, that can hold a weapon. We're going to put export controls on that. So if we look at the cost that Omega has uncovered from CCP documents, you're looking at an estimated cost for Optimus today of $46,000. But if Optimus is to be produced in America, that cost rises to $133,000. And it's not just the cost aspect of it, is Tesla is highly reliant on the Chinese supply chain. Obviously, the CCP knows this, is saying, hey, well, you got some superior technology. By the way, you're relying on us. So we're gonna put some rules in place here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking, this is not like a supply chain risk in the traditional way that we think about it, right? This is a structural concern. These rare earth magnets are essentially monopolized by the Chinese government. So there are opportunities for Tesla to look elsewhere, including onshoring, but that is a long-term process. And in the short term, really the only place you can go to for consistent, reliable supply of these magnets is China. You may be able to find some in other places in Asia, Japan and Korea, or potentially in Australia. But that is not something you can just turn to overnight. These are structural risks right now for Tesla in terms of being reliant on these Chinese rare earth materials. In addition, what we've uncovered through Omega's research and its ability to search through public records as well is the fact that the FTC here in the United States is now investigating Tesla for perhaps overstating its Made in America branding. With the reliance on these Chinese suppliers and subsystems, as well as Chinese rare earth materials, FTC is investigating whether or not Tesla meets the requirements for the amount of materials that go into a product to say publicly that it's made in America. And so not only is Tesla's reliance on Chinese materials structurally putting an impediment because of the new rules that are going into effect in China, but also they're causing issues here in the United States as well. And so, what we potentially see is a delay in the realization of the revenue stream that Tesla is stating for its Optimus robot technology.
There is the potential delay, and on the FTC note, this is according to the FTC and their public documents, that over 60% of Optimus components come from China. That's according to the FTC. And if that's not enough, well, Omega also uncovered this from the CCP that I want to talk about here. On March 2nd, Rob, the MIIT released a humanoid robots and embedded intelligence standardization system. Oh boy, here we go. So what does that mean? That means the standard suppliers that provide the intelligence, they have to proprietize Chinese humanoid projects like those from Xiaomi or Unitree that comply with the new national technical standard protocols. Tesla, as we know, they use proprietary closed loop systems. So the way that this law is written in China for this new standard, those suppliers that are supplying Tesla have to deprioritize building for Optimus and prioritize building for Unitree. That is another risk that Omega uncovered.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is really where you're starting to see the globalization and the global race between the US and China on humanoids come to fruition. The Chinese have given, as they have in other areas of emerging technology, their domestic companies a leg up in terms of the use of Chinese materials, the direction from the Chinese government about how those materials need to be prioritized among clients. And what this is doing is saying that there is a geopolitical importance to this technology that I think goes underappreciated in the market accounts of what Tesla and other US humanoid robots are building. You saw it today, right, at the White House. You had a figure AI robot walking down the red carpet with Melania Trump. The US government recognizes the importance of the development of humanoid technology. And the US, no doubt, is the leader in the cognitive AI layer of this technology. But in terms of the actual base infrastructure layer and its physical execution layer, Chinese have a real grip on this technology. And that is a structural risk that I think the US businesses, Figure AI, Tesla, others are going to have to really wrap their arms around in terms of how do they continue to build this technology at scale? How do they get the cost down for building at scale? And, it's a real tough question given that the materials that they need to build this technology are not under their control. They are subject to the whims, the priorities, and demands of the Chinese government right now.
And that's a scary place to be if you're looking at it and having to rely on them. And I'm having flashbacks here. We're not going back to the future, but we kind of are going to go back to the future here of electric vehicles. China became a giant choke point on that. It seems like here we go again. History is repeating itself. not with autonomous vehicles this time, but with humanoids. With that saying, when do you think we start to see policies to put in place in the US that prioritize this type of manufacturing? Because I noticed today with the figure AI at the White House, it had an American flag on his front chest. Very, very proud. That was to me, it was a very big symbol there.
Yeah, I mean, look, the U.S. When it passed the CHIPS Act a couple of years ago, I think is starting to realize that manufacturing of these rare earth materials, refining of them, discovery of them, is a real national security, national economic issue. And so I hope we don't have to find ourselves in the position that we did with EVs and battery technology, where we're having to play a severe game of catch up and looking, outside of the U.S. for innovative technologies on battery. And so I think what we have here is a real clear signal early on in this humanoid race, so to speak, that the U.S. needs to start producing its own rare earth materials and in greater volumes. And, I don't think the companies that are playing in this space are ignorant of that fact. I think they understand it. We have Tesla building its new lab, its Terraform lab. Perhaps that is in response to some of the structural things that we've talked about today. But I do think, as we look at an increasingly complex world driven by geopolitical events, everything from what's going on in the Middle East to what may potentially happen around the world, onshoring and having the domestic capabilities for building this technology has to be one of the US's top priorities going forward.
It has to be because, for all practical purposes, China said, "Up, Optimus, sorry, we're going to put a hold on you because Optimus requires approximately 3.5 kilograms of high performance NdFeB magnets per unit to service 40 servo motors." So, what does the MIIT say? Guess what? You have to get a non-military certification. So, what does that do from an economic standpoint? It puts Tesla's $685 million order for linear actuators on hold under review. Without that order going through, Optimus is going to get delayed. And you alluded to it, but I'm sitting here saying, okay, to me, is that why Terafab is getting accelerated? And yesterday, I was in Fort Worth with Mr. Pro Jr., and Governor Abbott came and talked about the factory, where he used to say they're accelerating it. Perhaps that's why we're seeing this massive acceleration. The Terafab say, wait, we can't be relying on this?
It could be. I mean, I think from a strategic point of view, look, Optimus, long-term, still a great bet to succeed and produce tremendous amount of volume and revenue for Tesla. I think it's the short term that we're looking at right now. The structural reliance on these materials from China is a real risk. And so having to get this approval from the MAIMT for or convincing them that it's non-dual use basically is what Tesla has to do. There's no timeline on that. You look at what we know from that rule, China doesn't have to act until it wants to act. And so that really puts a difficult kind of unknown into what Tesla is trying to do in the short term. Look, it's not about is Tesla's technology advancing at the right clip. I think it is. I mean, everything that we see and everything that we understand of it, they're not behind technology-wise, right? They may even be ahead. But in terms of the components that go into it, the physical execution, the structural risks, they're real. And this is something that I think folks need to take account of as they determine what risks that they want to place in the Optimus product line.
And if that risks that you described are not enough, there's another risk that's even bigger. China's implemented a Chinese version of the U.S. foreign direct product rule. So what does that mean? In theory, China could say, no, you can't export that product.
Right. You can't export it, even build it somewhere else, right? That's the thing. And so, I mean, this is something the U.S. has done as well. So this type of rule, kind of global reach and scope, is not new. The U.S. has done this with certain products as well. But it's kind of new for China in this area. And what that says is even if you collect all of the component parts in the right way from China and build them in the United States, the Chinese government still has an ability to reach into the US and tell you, no, you can't use those parts that you've acquired under the right rules in the right way to build the thing that you want to build.
You're right. Because even if you're assembling in California or Texas, nope, you can't do that. You can't even get out of the country. So it's a choke point, and it is a huge risk, and it's something that's what Omega is so good at. She's good at really uncovering these signals. And one of the features of our proprietary Omega algorithm, it gives Omega's take. And I want to go through each one of these Omega's takes with you, Rob, as it relates to the humanoid signal here. And this is to quote Omega. The actual deployment of autonomous systems remain constrained by Asian supply chain dependencies. This friction limits near-term revenue realization for humanoid robotics programs. I fully agree with that. I think she's spot on with that one.
Yeah, I think it is a huge near-term structural disadvantage. As I say, I remain very positive in the long term because I think these are issues. They're not unknowns in terms of how to address them. It just takes time to address them.
It does. And then here's another take from Omega. The Optimus delays expose a critical structural divide in the global autonomy race. The United States dominates the cognitive layer of physical AI, but Asia maintains an iron grip on the physical execution layer. We talked about it. That's right. Does this take Secretary Lutnick and the Department of Commerce to say, okay, we have, for all practical purposes, a majority of the brains that were built here? And I say majority of the brains because let's not forget the way that the DeepMind deal is structured. They're still in the UK. They're a UK company, but they are an ally. But the US is still ahead on the frontier lab research. But we don't have the ability to take that digital AI, if you want to call it the virtual AI, and put it into the physical yet.
Yeah, I think that's the key word. And I think you're seeing this, right? You're seeing this in different fields beyond humanoids where we're trying to build our own chip making facilities. We've got government support for that. We've got Terafab. We've got other production of these types of not only raw materials, but finished materials that we're trying to bring back into the United States in order to ensure that this structural divide that we're seeing between the physical and the cognitive, that divide is closed, and it's closed in the favor of companies in the United States that are developing these technologies.
You're right, and that raises the labor cost. And here's another take from Omega. Until Western manufacturers can replicate the cost efficiencies of the Chinese industrial robotics ecosystem, the commercialization of humanoid robots will remain gated by geopolitical tensions and overseas shipping logistics rather than neural network advancements. Omega tracks the global shipping lanes, and we're seeing what's happening in the Strait. And let's not forget, I'm sorry, there's a little issue with Taiwan. It just seems that there is a lot of risks here, and while onshoring eliminates the geopolitical risk, allows companies such as Tesla to build Optimus and Figure to build their humanoid, costs. Is this come down to advanced manufacturing and automation in factories? How do we get those costs down?
Yeah, I mean, the cost is going to be the real issue here, right? I mean, I think what we see is, from what Tesla says, it's about $46,000 or so for building each of their robots. If some of these immediate effects of what the Chinese government has done are taken into account, we're looking at maybe a new cost of $130,000. So it's almost 3x the amount to do the same thing with materials that aren't from China right now. And so there are other places you can go for some of these materials, but that cost doesn't come down to where the Chinese are producing it right now. You might get it down to $80,000 or $86,000, but at the current level of $46,000, there's no other place to turn to other than China for materials that come at such a reduced cost.
The one thing I think a lot about, and a friend of mine recently spent time there, was in Perth, Western Australia. And when you speak with individuals that are politically connected in Australia, they said that getting individuals to relocate to Perth is near impossible. That's why they're looking at automation. But however, you have the raw materials there. Can we get to a point where some sort of global manufacturing goes into Perth with refining, and they try and build an ecosystem which would really help that western part of Australia's economy?
I mean, I think so. You see that in Australia. You see some of these, particularly the type of materials that are going into the magnets that we're talking about. You see them in Australia. You see them in Canadian deposits. Um, I think there is real opportunity there. But again, these are not things that you can simply just turn on, right? It is a capital intensive, operationally intensive. Procedure in order to extract these materials and then to get these materials refined and put into the right types of chips and other things that can be used by the companies that we're talking about. And so I do think there is opportunity there. I think both the governments and businesses see it. It's just, what we're dealing with again is the constraint of time. And so, short term, this could be a real kind of uh, like we said, structural impediment. But long term, you solve these issues and you become even stronger, and you're able to produce them without the risks of these geopolitical tensions. And you mentioned one that we haven't even really touched on, which is potentially what happens with China and Taiwan. And we should probably reserve that for a whole nother conversation. But that is something that goes beyond, adds another layer of risk to even what we're talking about today.
There's a lot of risk in the Omega bottom line, because after every research report Omega generates for us, she gives us a bottom line. The bottom line on this signal this week is the rare earth choke point is not a risk. It is the current reality. The consensus view frames China rare earth export restrictions as a headwind to Tesla's Optimus timeline. Tesla's Optimus program is not delayed by engineering complexity. It is being throttled by Beijing's deliberate weaponization of rare earth and dual-use technology controls. Omega's right. And I think it's a signal that I'm happy we're here to talk about today, because it hasn't been covered a lot.
Agreed. I think it's one of the most underappreciated elements of the development of the technology, its ability to drive revenues, drive that multiple at Tesla that will get Elon to his trillionaire status. But it's also, you're going to have some direct impacts on when consumers are going to be able to engage with this technology, and when this technology is going to kind of become real for most people, which is like, how will it help me in my day-to-day life? And so I think all this is a potential timeline delay. I don't think it's decades of delay, but I do think it will have a kind of delay, both in terms of its financial impact on Tesla, as well as eventually the consumer impact of when I can interact with this technology.
I agree with you. It's going to be a delay. We don't know how long the delay will be, but if you read some of the studies that have come out of MIT, or actually some out of the Milken Institute of Aging, when you put a humanoid in a senior home or an individual that's trying to live on their own, they can interact with, okay, remember to take this pill today. Remember to take that pill today. Okay, Jeopardy's on at 5 o'clock. Companionship. And then when they have that companionship, they have a higher quality of life. So it's not just the talks around, oh, this is going to be good for factories. Oh, this will be fun. It can play soccer in the backyard with your child. No, it's going to have a really positive effect on humanity and society. And I think that's something that we'll continue to talk about, and hopefully we could see more signals. So let's move on to the next signal. The next signal has taken us to Europe, where on March 18, 2026, the EU parliamentaries IMCO and LIBE committees voted 101 to 9 to delay. That's right. Oh boy, to delay classifying L4 autonomous vehicles as high risk under the EU AI Act compliance target. It's been delayed to August 2nd, 2028. I'm just going to say it. Was the EU going a little too fast on regulation? Like, well, wait a second. Because when you're voting 101 to 9, that's not exactly a close vote.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, the EU AI Act was passed a couple of years ago. This is in 2024. And now we're sitting here 2 years later, a couple of months out from its effective date, which is August of 2026. In between, the EU had put upon itself kind of a directive: let's develop some of the guidance and procedures and requirements that folks who are designated to be participating in high risk activities with AI need to meet. Now, they haven't put any of those policies or procedures or standards out. And so what you have is this great uncertainty about how one would comply with these things, when they need to comply with it, and what things that you can do today to prepare yourself for what's coming. And where this gets really interesting is, right now, without further action, and there is one more step that needs to happen for this delay to take effect. This rule goes into effect in August. And well, all this new bill is saying is, well, we think we're not going to hit the August timeline. Everybody knows we're not going to hit the August timeline. So it will go into effect in December of 2027. And for embedded AI, which is what goes into autonomous vehicles and things like that, the new rules won't take effect until August of 2028, basically, 6-7 months after most of the rest of the thing would take effect in December of 2027. What this really signals is, look, the EU, again, is just providing regulatory uncertainty on top of regulatory uncertainty. It's already difficult to operate there as a AI or AV company, mostly because there's the intersection between what they've got going on for what they call sectorial legislation, which is the legislation that kind of applies to how you might build a car and the standards that you have to do for that, as well as what the AV standards for operating and safety are for each particular jurisdiction in the EU. And now you have an additional layer of uncertainty, which is, how will the intersection between this AI Act and those sectorial legislations operate? And so really what it becomes is another reason for folks to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go look at deploying my technology if I'm an AV company in the Middle East. I'm going to look at the Asia countries. I'm going to look at London, who's no longer a part of the EU, right? And this is why you're not seeing, I believe, many folks saying, we're immediately going to look to target Germany or immediately going to look to target Spain. Now, they're on the roadmap. They want to be on the roadmap. But even if you're filled with lawyers and regulatory attorneys, as some of these places like Waymo can do, right? They can have the smartest minds looking at this. There's still so much uncertainty there. And really, it's just hurting not only the technology coming there, but also the technology that wants to be built there. And so, again, I think this is another EU kind of self-own, which is like, you wonder why we haven't seen many autonomous vehicle companies out of the EU countries. And this is an example of why.
And as part of this legislation, I almost fell out of my chair because I'm like, how do you define this? Privacy by design for all the sensors, all the data has to be encrypted, can't have any identifiable information, must be kept in the EU. Sensors, privacy by design, we see Bosch is coming out with a new privacy sensor. If I'm looking at this from a technical standpoint, I basically, and this is more of your wheelhouse than mine, I'm like, oh God, I got to have a whole separate different car with different sensor suites to meet this regulatory environment. Am I reading and interpreting this right?
It could be read that way, yes. I think really what it does is it gives a prioritization to those companies that can meet this privacy by design. Or in some senses, what it does is it gives a prioritization to companies that aren't using as much cloud computing technology. And so if you're somebody who's not using, maps, you're going mapless, or you're relying purely on cameras, where you have most of your data and data collection coming from the edge, right, from the compute unit on the vehicle itself, you're more easily going to be able to meet what we think are going to be the requirements under the EU AI Act. Now, if you've got preloaded maps, or you want to take your data and put it up in the cloud and train your model off of that, that's going to be a lot harder to do under this, right? These are basically localization requirements. And so if you're in some kind of hybrid model, which some of these companies are, which is use of preloaded maps, moving your training data out over the cloud. My assumption is that Waymo does this. You're going to have to look perhaps at a either more localized system, or you're going to have to look at different sensor suites. And that could be very difficult. If you're having your car produced online with a certain sensor and that sensor is not EU compliant under this act, do you build a different line? Do you have to then kind of after manufacturing go back and change each of the cars that you want to put into the EU? This all adds cost and time, right? And it's another disincentive to come there. But if you're somebody like Tesla and you're using camera only and your edge computing is there and you don't have preloaded maps and you're able to kind of train your data locally, this may provide you an advantage. So I don't know if it's as crystal clear as like everybody is penalized under this as it is that some people are, I would say, if I'm the EU, incentivized to do something different. But it could wind up being a cost difference for a Waymo to operate in the EU from what Tesla is doing in the EU. So that may give an advantage to Tesla as well.
It could, but then the question is, and this is all can be done with AI, you're going to have to blur all the faces. And then I think about this, I'm like, oh boy, is this GDPR all over again, where you're trying to put a de facto global standard? Is that where this is going?
Oh, I think so. Yes, for sure. But I mean, look, these are not new types of prescriptions. We see this in many places, right? If you try to operate a financial center or a data center in the Middle East, you have localization requirements. Data must be kept locally. China does this, right? All of the data from your vehicles in China, if you're even allowed to operate there, all that information has to be kept locally within Chinese. So these kind of walled regulatory gardens, so to speak, about where you can keep data, what you can collect, what you can't, they're not new, but they're also, in a sense, anti-competitive, right? It doesn't create an open market. And so if you're an external company, a US company trying to come in, assuming that you're going to operate under similar rules as the US, this may not be the case. And you're going to have to create a specific vehicle or a specific set of components or even a specific data center where you train your model, your EU model, so to speak. And that's another cost, right? And so that's another reason to say, when does this technology come there? It could be delayed. And I think the EU seems to be fine with that.
It's sad, really, when you think about it. If you just look at the German automotive industry, once the crown jewel of the world for automotive, no longer the crown jewel. And as of today, WeRide is operating in several European countries. Baidu is operating in several European countries. And they're eventually going to be on Lyft, and Momenta is going to be there, and then Uber is going to be there. There's a lot of data that's going to go back and forth between the AV partner and the robotaxi platform provider. It seems like based on this, when August 2nd, 2028 rolls around, oh boy, somebody's going to file a lawsuit. So yeah, we're not going to comply with this. It just seems that this is not going to be resolved by then unless I'm completely misreading this entire picture.
Look, I think this is part of the reason they need a delay, right? Some of this stuff is supposed to be addressed that was supposed to be addressed in the intervening years between 2024 and 2026. And look, this not only applies to AVs, right? We're talking about embedded AI and AVs for our audience, but this applies to all the large language models, all the things like that. So if you're a small company, right, and you want to use AI technology to help you hire over in the EU countries, you're not quite sure if you can do that, right? Because you're going to have to prove, if somebody sues you, that the AI wasn't biased in some sense. And so there's a lot of openness as to how you would prove the AI wasn't biased. And this could go for the same for an AV, right? You have to have this kind of traceability and decision-making under this act that's going to be really interesting for certain companies. Right? I talked about how Tesla may benefit under this in one sense, but they could also, on the same side, have a real challenge. how are they going to have the traceability of the AI's decision making as to what the vehicle did in an incident? Some of their neural networks and things like that, it is really hard to go back through the black box and figure out exactly why this decision was made at this time. And the thing is, the next time the technology encounters the same thing, its decision making may be different. It may have learned, or it may be taking something else into account. And so it could produce real challenges when it comes to kind of meeting the requirements. Now, right now, the biggest challenge is the requirements aren't even out there, so you don't even know what you need to meet. Hence, the reason that Omega picked up the signal is, hey, the EU is signaling it needs more time. And that's an interesting signal to give out to the market, which is like, hey, we're not loving the market for AI providers in EU to begin with. And now you're signaling that you're even kind of confused as to what you need to do yourself. It's not a great signal for the market.
It's not a great signal. Signal's not from Omega. This is you and I going back a decade and a half together, when you were in industry and I was in a appointed government role, and certain cities, not Beverly Hills, by the way, we never asked for it. Certain cities asked for all the data.
Yep.
And then you had consortiums that showed up trying to get the data. And we all know where that went. The cities never got the data. It just seems like EU is trying to get that same playbook to go all over again. And if so, it's going to be dragged out. And one of the private sector companies is probably going to throw the privacy element back at the EU. Well, you want to preach privacy? Well, sharing this data with you is a violation of privacy. It seems like there's a lot that still has to be litigated here.
I think that's right. I think, look, I mean, ideally, they have a robust discussion as to what types of information needs to be shown ahead of time, right? They've already classified this AI embedded in AVs as high risk, right? Meaning that it could cause harm to life or limb. I don't think that classification is wrong. I think that's a correct classification. But what are the kind of rules of the road now that you're in that classification? How do you produce the evidence? What data needs to be submitted? How frequently? How are updates taken into account? Things like that. Those are really difficult questions. And the further they kick them down the line, I think the further they come to a point where the technology is just passing by and all the questions are wrong to begin with. And so, I think the EU needs to really start to understand and interact more with the companies and understand the technology is advancing. And so some of its thinking as to what they require from the technology, it's not incorrect, right? I mean, I'm not arguing that they shouldn't be regulating in these areas and shouldn't be considering things like privacy, but really what this is a white flag, almost saying, we don't know what to do with it, so we haven't done anything with it. And at some point, you need to fill in the details if you want people to really invest and bring that technology, which I think you do. I think you want to create an ecosystem there. You want to have innovation. You want to see this technology because it is good, right? I think there are a lot of benefits to bringing this technology to places all around the world, and then having people look at it and say, you know what, I can build something better than that. And you can't even get inspired to do that if you can't even put this stuff out on the road.
Oh, and that brings us to Omega's take, because Omega was spot on with this one. And Omega said, the European Union is executing a strategic counteroffensive, having lost the foundation model software war to the US and the hardware manufacturing war to China. Regulators are weaponizing compliance to turn the continent into a regulatory walled garden. This explicitly subsidizes their legacy industrial base, protecting domestic incumbents such as Bosch and Continental from foreign software monopolies. Why single out Bosch? Because they have an AI Act compliant LiDAR and sensor suite that you need to deploy. This is European Union protectionism 101. There's no other way for me to say this to you.
Look, I think Omega is spot on. It's spot on. But, that protectionism, I think, is a real detriment to the development of their own kind of advanced technology ecosystem.
That's Europe. Now let's go to Canada. Waymo is eyeing a Canadian expansion. not to one market, but to two markets that Omega uncovered lobbying records. She has great access to all this publicly available data. The markets that Waymo's looking at deploying in based on lobbying records, Toronto and Vancouver. We know that the Canadian regulatory environment is not the easiest to get through. I'm not saying it's as strict as the EU, but it's complex. What do we know about these two potential deployments in Vancouver and Toronto that Waymo is eyeing, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's a smart move by Waymo to look at the further expansion in the North American market, right? I think what people who aren't familiar with kind of the Canadian way is that it's a very provincial driven system, right? They do have a federal government, but the federal government powers aren't as expansive as they are in the United States. And so what we have here is kind of a tale of two provinces. You have the Ontario province, where Toronto is located. They have kind of, I would say, given a soft embrace to AV technology. They've been in this position for a while. I would give them credit. They've not been kind of a latecomer to this. They've done a lot of research, a lot of talking with companies. Toronto, the city of Toronto has done some pilot programs and things like that. And so I think for Waymo, given what we've seen of its technology, right, and how well it's worked in multiple cities in the United States, I think Toronto is a natural place to start expansion in Canada. I think you have a relatively open market. They are going to kind of want to put the technology through its paces. They're going to want reporting, and they're going to want robust interaction with local law enforcement and things of that nature. But I think they have a real opportunity to kind of be the initial dominant player in the Toronto market, even if it starts at a small scale. And so that's a credit to Ontario and the folks there and the city of Toronto and some of the kind of forward thinking they've had on a lot of technologies in Toronto. Now, Vancouver, they have a much different approach, right? So in the British Columbia province, they've been a little bit hesitant to adopt new technologies, and that's putting it kindly. We saw a similar divide happen when Uber and Lyft tried to get there in the middle part of the 2000 teens, where Toronto, it was a robust debate. I remember being in City Hall and at some of those meetings where a lot of the taxi drivers from Mississauga and other places were really opposed to Uber and Lyft coming there, but we eventually got it done. Whereas it took many years after getting into Toronto to get into Vancouver. And some of that is being played out again in the AV space. So British Columbia has already taken a position that bars anything above level 3 technology from being on its roads. So there's your initial impediment, right? It's not like you're trying to convince them to do something for the first time. They've already taken a stance, which is we don't want this technology here. Now, if you look at what the city of Vancouver and other folks in the government there have said, this ban doesn't prevent potentially a pilot project with somebody behind the wheel or something that might be akin to, manual testing or things like that. But they are going to need to take an affirmative step to allow this technology on the road. And one other thing to keep in mind, you not only have to go through the government in terms of the city of Vancouver and the British Columbia province to get approval to operate, but you have a separate entity there called the ICBC, which is the Insurance Commission of British Columbia. Now, they have kind of dominant, unique, singular control. It's like the singular insurance body for automobiles in British Columbia. And if they don't provide you insurance or provide you an ability to insure your vehicles out there, your vehicles can't go on the road. So you not only, if you're Waymo, have to get the government in terms of operationally allowing you to move forward, then you have to get the ICBC to insure your vehicles moving forward. And so there's a whole nother challenge as well. And so I think it's important to start there and start that conversation, which I know Omega has uncovered that they've started this conversation a couple of months ago. And they've sent some high-level folks, including the CEO, up there to talk to some of the government folks. But actually seeing a meaningful expansion into Vancouver is going to be significantly after you see meaningful expansion in Toronto. And this is the interesting thing, right? That has nothing to do with the advancement of Waymo's technology, right? It's not as if it is a completely different driving environment in Vancouver than it is in Toronto. Yes, I know a lot of people who are from Vancouver will say we're completely different. Look at our highways. We're surrounded by the mountains. There's more snow. But I'm like, I've driven in both. It's not that different. The cities are very different, and each person has their favorite city in the different provinces. But materially, the driving is not that different. What we're talking about here is a difference in regulatory approach, and that is going to either slow or accelerate adoption.
You're right about the driving environment. I've done both, and so very similar, but the regulatory is a lot different. And I want to hone in here in Toronto before we get back to Vancouver, because in January, Waymo's co-CEO, Takedra, she met with council staff members. And this is an exact quote from the lobbying record that Omega uncovered I want to read. To discuss the potential development of bylaws and regulations related to autonomous driving technologies, including as it relates to operational authorizations, commercial authorizations, goods delivery operations, and ride hail operations. Okay, we understand the ride hail, the commercialization, goods delivery. That stood out to me. Is that a potential opening that Waymo could explore that, or is that, can we get everything under one regulatory environment so if we decide to expand once again into goods, it's already in place?
I mean, my guess, and based upon having had those discussions up there, you want to go as broad as possible to cover as much, because you don't want to have to keep coming back. Every time you come back, that opens up further discussion from those that are opposed to what you're already doing. And so, look, they may very well be trying anyway to get a foothold in there. It could start with goods delivery, right? It could start with ride hailing. It could start with, ride hailing in areas that are outside of the financial district, right? Up by where, York and the University of Toronto are, which is a beautiful campus, by the way. People should go visit it. It's got a great view of downtown. But, I think if I'm Waymo, I go in and I'm saying, hey, look, this is as expansive of an ask as I can get, and we'll see what gains traction. And it gives you an opportunity to say, well, maybe we'll start here and then move to there, because you want to provide as much flexibility to the city of Toronto as possible to allow you to go in a way that works for them. Because ultimately, my experience up in Toronto with Lyft was, if you're willing to work with them to find a way in, you'll eventually get in. And so it's a little bit different of a place. I don't find it a place to be in and just say, we're coming, deal with it. If they're willing to work with you, so they should be willing to work with the city as well. And so I think that's what I read into that ask, is like, hey, we can work with you along many different fronts, but we really like to get started on just any of them right now.
That's a positive. And from a regulatory standpoint in Canada, how do the airport negotiations work to do drop off and pick up at the airport?
Well, that's a whole different ball of wax, right? The airports are regulated differently in Canada than they are here. Plus, the Pearson Airport is quite a distance away from downtown Toronto. It's 20 plus miles outside of it. And then they do have a little airport there called Billy Bishop, which I find is the coolest airport in the world to fly into, because you can take a tunnel under Lake Ontario to get up into downtown Toronto. I think airports is a stretch right now to even look at airports there. Like I said, you've got a different kind of regulatory body for the airports. It brings in federal oversight as well from Ottawa and things of that nature. And so I think that's a complexity that you get to after you've shown that you can deliver a service that is safe and reliable in downtown Toronto or greater Toronto, Hamilton area, depending on and where they might be able to operate.
As you clearly laid out, there's a lot of complexities and a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Let's go back to Vancouver, because there was a statement on Wednesday, March 25th, from the ministry to the Vancouver Sun that stated, at this time, the ministry is not pursuing an autonomous vehicle pilot project, and Waymo has not approached the ministry to request one. That's very blunt language, and it's a clear contrast between the filing that we had in Toronto versus Vancouver. So, is it your assumption or your guess that if you look at Canada as a whole, Toronto is more likely to come online before Vancouver potentially?
Yes, I think well in advance. I would put it in the years in advance, at least 12 to 24 months in advance of a Vancouver launch.
That's really good insight. And that insight brings us to Omega's take on this. And Omega says the regulatory angle most miss is a jurisdictional gridlock between provincial and federal authorities. British Columbia is deferring to Transport Canada's overarching safety rules, meaning Waymo must secure federal exemptions before provincial lobbying can yield commercial results. Combined with local pushback over congestion and extreme weather highway safety, the capital deployment timeline for Canadian robotaxi operations is structurally delayed. And did you program Omega? Because it sounds very similar to what you just elegantly described to the audience.
I think Omega and I are having a mind meld at times, but that's not surprising since I've tried to dump most of what is good from this brain into Omega. And now that may not amount to much, but at least it's powering Omega for now.
It's powering Omega with our proprietary research, our brains, and publicly available data. This is our new show, Autonomy Signals. Each and every Thursday, Rob and I will be here breaking down the signals in the autonomy economy. If you're interested in learning more about a proprietary AI powered by Omega, please send an email to alpha@autnmy.ai. That's alpha@autny.ai. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Autonomy Signals. Rob, great first show, sir.
I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I think I can't wait for the next one, and we'll keep on moving. The future is bright.
The future is bright, and we'll keep uncovering signals.